Hello and welcome, guys. I thank you for taking out time to be here with me once again. Tonight, we're beginning our series on freedom and forgiveness. I believe that is chapter 10 in my book, Recreating a Better Me. If you haven't already got your copy, you can grab a copy on Amazon. It comes in 3 formats: paperback, audio, as well as Kindle. So you can get it in either of those 3 formats, or you can stay tuned till the end of the video tonight, and I can tell you where you can get your copy if you don't have one. All right, guys. If you're joining me tonight, go ahead and like and share this video, and we will get started. Again, our first topic in this series of 3. We're going to have 3, so this will be one of 3. We're going to try to answer the question why forgiving is sometimes so hard for us to do. And I believe that if we've lived long enough, that we've all been faced with a situation to where we've experienced some pain or trauma or unfavorable hardship that required us in some form or another to forgive. So one thing that I want you to keep in mind as we're talking tonight is that I'm going to go over some ideas of why I think sometimes it's hard for us to forgive others. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the things that I discuss tonight fits your situation or your reason if you're having trouble forgiving someone. This is just a conversation between you and I just want to share my perception of why sometimes we get stuck in that pain or that trauma that results in being a hard place for us to forgive. So I'm not here to be your therapist in any kind of way or to try to diagnose you. None of that. I'm just here as a friend to have a conversation with you and to share some insight that may or may not be beneficial to you. Okay, so with that being said, if I do realize that this is a sensitive subject, so if something is said tonight that offends you or you desire to question, feel free to leave a comment or to message me, and I'll try to address it as sensitive as I can, because I do know that this is a sensitive subject. Otherwise, it is not my intent tonight, nor is it ever my intent to cause you to feel some kind of way or that I'm putting you on Front Street and exposing you before the world. Because I know that sometimes when we're dealing with things, sometimes we feel like a victim. Okay, so that is never my intent. I do know that thinking back, and that's the hardest thing about doing these lives and sitting before you and being so vulnerable, is that I have to look at my own life and I have to take my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own experiences into consideration as I sit here and talk about these things. And as I think back, not only during the times where I struggled with forgiving and being hurt and angry and wanting to project that pain back on someone else, I think that a lot of it came from my struggle to love myself. I think that I was so dependent on needing the affirmation of someone else that I put myself in a position of vulnerability in the hands of the wrong person. So I hope that I'm making that plain enough to where you can see what I'm saying. I didn't love myself enough to make wise decisions about my courtships and my relationships. And as a result of that, it was almost like I walked into a trap to be set up to be misused and or abused in some sense, to be victimized. And not to say that I didn't love myself so I deserve that type of treatment, but just to say that had I been the woman that I have grown and developed to be today, I do not believe that I would somehow have found myself in a situation to where I would feel like the victim, because we assume that role of victim when we trust somebody with our heart and it ends up where we're the ones that are being hurt. And so I believe that since I struggled with my esteem and I struggled with who I was, that it became hard at that time for me to forgive the person who caused me pain and or trauma. So I feel like when we find it hard to forgive, that's one of the main things we have to look at. How do we see ourselves? Do we love ourselves, or did we trust our self-worth or our value into the hands of someone that just took advantage of it? And so if that is the case, that's one of the things that we have to work on. What is it going to take for me to love myself? Because if I love myself, I'm going to forgive. Because I love myself enough not to hold on and to continue to allow that pain and bitterness to eat away at my bones like a cancer. And that's what unforgiveness does. It eats away at us. It literally kills us. And it is a harmful, destructive way to have to walk around with that bitterness in our heart so much projected at someone else, when the reality is we really don't like who we are. We really struggle with loving who we are. Another reason could be our ego. An image maybe that we had of ourselves, and goes back to that fantasy that I talked about, how I was so good at pretending pretending I was someone that I wasn't, and then to have somebody to come in and put a roadblock into my fantasy world. And what that does to my ego at that time when I'm hurt or when I'm subjected to the pain or to the drama brought to me from someone else, I forget who I am and begin to take on that role as the victim. So now, with my ego being tarnished, I've lost all focus on who I am. And as a result, it's hard for me to forgive because I feel like at that time that the person that projects pain on us or subjects us to that pain, at that time they've taken the role of control. It's kind of like those people that have been in abusive relationships, physical abuse and emotional abuse, and the people are always asking, why don't they get out? Well, at that time, we've lost who we are and given that power over to someone else. And again, it all goes back to giving our power over. And I don't think that we do that willfully. I think that the blows of life can be so hard sometimes that we don't know any other way. Hurting people hurt people. And I know you've heard that saying before. And so it begins to become natural to us, to the point to where we don't know who we are. Our identity is based upon the pain and the traumas that we suffer. So if we don't know who we are, we don't know who to forgive. Oftentimes we'll blame ourselves. Remember, I said already that we struggle with loving ourselves anyway. So then we begin to blame ourselves because of what has been inflicted on us and assume an alternative identity or ego. So we don't forgive ourselves, we're mad at ourselves, and as a result, we're mad at everybody else. And so we don't know how to process that information. I believe that sometimes it's hard to us to find a way to forgive because we're not willing to let go of the past. Because if somebody has hurt you, that's past tense. And so often we drag it. We drag that pain with us. We drag that heartache with us. It's easy to remember. It's easy to point a finger. And we feel like if we can carry it around long enough, that somehow we can project that pain back upon the person who caused us pain or that event that caused us pain. And it doesn't work that way, guys. The past is our past for a reason. The past is our past for a reason. And if we continue to hold on to it and refuse to let go of it, it's going to continue to root up bitterness within our memories. It's going to continue to re-traumatize us. We continue to be victimized over and over and over again. And we're doing it to ourselves at that point. Oftentimes, our abuser or the one who betrayed us, whatever the situation is, oftentimes they did that to us for a season. And now we've taken over that season, and now we're doing it to ourselves because we continue to take it everywhere we go. We always see through the lens of that victim. Hello, guys. I see some of you joining me and leaving me comments. I appreciate that. Tonight is a very sensitive subject. We're talking about why it's sometimes so hard for us to forgive. And I appreciate it if you guys would like and share this video. Also, feel free to leave a comment. I'll be glad to address your comment. And I am grateful that you are here joining in with me tonight because this is a tough spot for me. It is a tough spot because I have to go back and revisit things that maybe sometimes we feel like we've gotten over. And sometimes it's a memory that just triggers so much. And it causes us to be so grateful for the strides that we've made in life. And it causes us also to be so grateful and thankful for how we overcome. Because we know a lot of times if we've ever been victimized or betrayed or traumatized, we know that when we think back, there could have been times we could have been dead and gone. There could have been times we could have caused someone else, took somebody else's life and be sitting in a prison cell. There's just so much into forgiving people. And sometimes we can take it so for granted, guys. Sometimes we can take this thing for granted and take it lightly. But as I think about it, if we're not willing to let go of the past, at that point where they victimized us then, now we've assumed that role of the victimizer and we continue to victimize ourselves. And at that point, if we're victimizing ourselves, we can't see forgiveness in our perception. We can't see it. We can't perceive forgiveness because the hurt is just built upon. Can you imagine every day living your life, looking in the rearview mirror at your pain? How can you focus on the things that are in front of you in this beautiful life that God has for you? Holding on to all that pain. Don't you know that who you worship paid the price for anything that we could ever endure in life, anything that could ever do us harm? He paid the price for that. We don't have to continue to beat ourselves up and traumatize ourselves and re-victimize ourselves by being unwilling to let the past go. When I look back at my past, I see a whole lot of pain and disappointment. I'm grateful that my steps were orchestrated by God and that the God of my life. Let me get that straight. So with that being said, I appreciate my experiences. I appreciate my growth. And I realize that He paid it all. And He is a loving and forgiving God. And the closer I am to Him, the more of his character I begin to take on. So therefore, if he is a forgiving God, if he is a loving God, because I belong to him and he abides in me, then I must assume that same responsibility for the people who hurt me. Sometimes we have to put ourselves in their shoes. We have to see it through their eyes. Because hurting people hurt people, I don't believe that if they were not hurting people, that they would hurt us. You'd almost have to have a satanic mind state to hurt somebody that trusts you. To victimize a child who trusts you and put their trust in you, they had to be hurt. To betray somebody, at one time I feel like they had to be betrayed. So they're inflicting their pain upon you, and now you're a victim. And now that they hurt you that time, and you're moving on in your life because you won't let go and forgive, let go of the past, you continue to re-traumatize yourself. So now you're the abuser of your own unwillingness to forgive. So it matters who your spiritual source is, because letting go of something that's so traumatic, remember, it begins to imprint in our mind. So the closer you draw to your spiritual connector, the less of the effects of that trauma or that experience is going to be for you. So if you're in a place to where you're finding it hard to forgive, that's another area we have to evaluate. Are we still dragging the past into our future? Are we really willing to let it go? Because the Lord I serve, he's not going to force me to do anything. I have to make a conscious decision that I'm willing to forgive. And because I am forgiven, I owe it to forgive. Starting with forgiving myself for reliving that trauma and not loving myself enough. And then go back and take my identity back. Because I'm not identified by the things that happened to me. My identity comes from my spiritual connector who gave me life. He paid it all. He paid it all. And if he is living, then I must live. Bitterness and unforgiveness doesn't need to abide here. But you have to be willing to let go of the past and not drag it around anymore. I believe that another area is that we don't really understand how the life cycle works. We fail to take into account the cycles of life. Somehow we think that everything in life should be sunshine and roses. But life doesn't work that way. Life has good days, it has bad days. There's ups and there's downs. There's good and there's good experiences, bad experiences. And so when we understand how the cycle of life works, then I think we will be more willing to forgive. Some of my greatest gains in learning who I am and learning to overcome the traumas that I faced in life was understanding that I grow best in the unfavorable conditions, in those traumatic things. Life is designed for us to have and have abundantly. But there is an opposer in life, an adversary. And he comes to kill, steal, and destroy your character. So that means that even though we do have good days, if we live long enough, we'll understand that there's going to be some rainy days ahead. But those days don't come to destroy us and overtake us. For if they did, none of us be here, right? None of us would be here. So I understand that we're going to have difficult times in life. And the more I understand that, the easier it becomes for me to forgive. Now, in forgiving and understanding how this life cycle works, that doesn't mean that we have to be buddy-buddy again. That doesn't mean that we have to reconnect again. It's not saying any of that. All it's saying is that I understand how this life cycle works. And I know that in life there's going to be pain and there's going to be trauma and there's going to be experiences that give me a blow or two. But being that I survived it, I'm willing to forgive and move on. But that doesn't necessarily mean you get to go along with me. That's just saying you no longer have control over my mind. You no longer have that power, that control to keep me feeling down in the dumps and to blind me so that I have to assume the identity that you think you gave to me. This is saying I forgive you, I survived, and now I'm moving on. You have to be willing to and to take that power back. We wear these labels that other people give us. And we can't see ourselves from these labels. And sometimes if we strip that label from defining who we are and stand on who we are, who we become, who we've grown to be, and understand that life is a cycle of hurting people, and that put ourselves in their shoes to think from through their eyes, understanding what all your Savior did to give you his identity, take that power and control back, then we'll find that forgiving It's not so hard to do. Doesn't mean that I forget, but it simply means that I'm taking that power back. I'm going to define who I am. Not you, not what you've done to me, not what happened, but I get to define that at that point. I think that sometimes we neglect to accept people for who they are. I can think back in early relations, liking a man, knowing full well what he was about, knowing full well what I was getting myself into. But because I had in my mind that he could be so much more, I ended up being in a situation to where it took a toll on me really seeing the situation for what it was. When you finally see people for who they are and accept that they are who they are, and they're never going to be who we pretend or imagine or hope for them to be, then we can just simply forgive them. Forgive them. Unforgiveness eats away at our bones like a cancer. And if you're in a situation to where you found it hard to forgive, then please consider any of the number of things that I said tonight. And last but not least, when we don't know how to process grief and we get stuck in the grieving process, sometimes that's all it takes, is getting a little help. And sometimes we all know that we need help. Being a victim of traumatic things that we had no control over causes us grief. And if we don't know how to cope and process the stages of grief, sometimes we have to seek out additional help. I do hope I've said something tonight to help you understand why sometimes it's so hard for us to forgive. I appreciate your comments, guys. If you have questions or comments, please leave it in the comment section. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow night in our video 2 of 3 in our Freedom in Forgiveness series. Also, guys, we know that last night we gave away our Easter basket, but I did say if you stay tuned with me tonight, if you don't have a copy of this book, Recreating a Better Me, and you'd like a copy tonight, I am offering free copies of this book as a token of my gift to you for sacrificing so much of your time to be here with me. So if you want to know how you can get a copy of this book for free, please go to my website, www.triciabraysmith.weebly.com. and you'll see a button there that says book giveaway, and the instructions are there. If you would take time to go to my website and fill out that information there, I'll send you a free copy of Recreating a Better Me. All right, guys, I hope you have a good night. Thanks for joining me.